The city lights sprawled beneath him like a sea of broken promises, each window a tiny universe of lives being lived while his remained frozen in time. James Richardson stood alone in the glass-walled boardroom on the 45th floor, his reflection ghostly against the November darkness. The clock on the wall read 11:17 p.m. Everyone else had gone home hours ago, back to families, to warmth, to people who would ask about their day and actually care about the answer. He loosened his tie, the silk whispering against his collar, like the last words his wife had spoken 8 months ago. Sarah. Her name still caught in his throat like a piece of shattered glass. The cancer had taken her quickly, and he had been at the office for most of it. Always one more meeting, one more deal, one more excuse. The boardroom table stretched before him, polished to a mirror shine, reflecting nothing but emptiness. His phone lay silent on the mahogany surface. No texts, no calls. No one waiting for him anywhere in this vast, indifferent city. He had built an empire of steel and glass and cutting-edge medical technology, devices that saved thousands of lives, and yet he could not save the one life that mattered most. James gathered his coat and briefcase, the weight of both feeling heavier than usual. The elevator descended in silence, each floor a marker counting down to ground level, to the parking garage, to another night alone in a penthouse that echoed with absence. The building was a tomb after hours, all chrome and marble and the hollow sound of his footsteps. The parking garage stretched out before him, a concrete cavern painted in harsh fluorescent blues and sickly yellows. The lights flickered occasionally, casting dancing shadows that made the pillars look like giant bones. His Italian leather shoes clicked against the cement, each step echoing in the vast emptiness. He was halfway to his Mercedes when he heard it, a sound that did not belong. Not the mechanical hum of the ventilation system, or the distant rumble of traffic from the street above. This was organic, human, a soft, stifled whimper that spoke of fear trying desperately to stay quiet. James stopped walking, his senses, dulled by grief and routine, suddenly sharpened. He listened, holding his breath, and there it was again, the unmistakable hiccup of a child trying not to cry. His heart, that muscle he had thought permanently numbed, began to pound. He turned slowly, scanning the rows of parked vehicles, the concrete pillars, the dark corners where the flickering lights could not quite reach. Then he saw movement, just a flutter, a shift of shadow near a support column 30 feet away. He approached cautiously, his breathing shallow, his mind racing through possibilities. A lost child? An injury? Something worse? The closer he got, the more he could make out. Two small figures huddled against the cold concrete, pressed into the corner as if trying to disappear into the wall itself. Two little girls. The older one sat upright, her back against the pillar, arms wrapped protectively around a smaller child who could not have been more than 4 years old. Their clothes were thin, completely wrong for the November cold. No coats, no proper shoes. The older girl's sneakers had holes in them, and the little one wore only socks, one of them torn at the toe. Their blonde hair was tangled and dirty. Their faces were streaked with grime and tears. But it was their eyes that stopped James cold. The younger child's eyes were wide and terrified, like a small animal cornered by a predator. The older girl's eyes were different. They were hard, eyes that had seen things no 7-year-old should ever witness. James knelt down slowly, making himself smaller, less threatening. He kept his distance, his hands visible, his voice soft. "Hey there," he said, the words coming out rougher than he intended. He cleared his throat and tried again. "Are you hurt? Do you need help?" The older girl flinched but did not run. She pulled her sister closer, those ancient eyes assessing him, calculating risk versus reward. The little one buried her face against her sister's shoulder, clutching a faded stuffed rabbit that had seen better days. "It's okay," James continued, keeping his voice as gentle as he could manage. "I'm not going to hurt you. My name is James. I work here in this building. Do you know where your parents are?" Silence. The only sound was the hum of the lights and the distant wail of a siren somewhere in the city above. James waited. He could see the older girl's hands trembling slightly, could see how her thin shoulders shook with cold, or fear, or both. Then she spoke, and her voice was so quiet he almost missed it. "Can you take her instead of me?" The words hit James like a physical blow. His breath caught, his vision blurred for a moment. In all his years, through every business negotiation, every betrayal, every loss, nothing had ever reached inside his chest and squeezed his heart quite like those 7 words. "What do you mean?" he managed to ask, his own voice suddenly unsteady. The girl's chin trembled. Her eyes, so hard a moment ago, began to fill with tears she fought desperately to hold back. "Please, mister." Her voice cracked. "Take Sophie. She's the good one. She never gets in trouble." Her arms tightened around the little girl. "I'll go back to him. Just, just don't let him find her." The smaller child, Sophie, made a sound like a wounded animal. "No," she cried, her voice muffled against her sister's shoulder. "Don't leave me." James felt something break open inside him. Some dam he had built after Sarah died. Some wall he had erected to keep the world at bay. It shattered, and in its place came a clarity so sharp it almost hurt. He thought of Sarah in those final days, lying in the hospital bed while he paced the corridors, phone pressed to his ear, closing deals while she slipped away. He thought of her voice, weak but insistent, telling him that kindness mattered most when you least expected it, that being present was worth more than any fortune. "Listen to me," James said, and this time his voice was steady, certain. "Nobody is taking anyone, not you, not Sophie. Nobody is going back anywhere tonight." He paused, letting that sink in. "You're both coming with me." The older girl stared at him, disbelief and desperate hope warring in her expression. "Why would you help us?" she whispered. "You don't even know us." James reached up slowly and removed his coat. It was cashmere, expensive, completely inappropriate for children, but it was warm. He held it out to them. "No," he said quietly. "I don't know you, but I think maybe I'm supposed to." He wrapped the coat around their small shoulders. It engulfed them both, and for just a moment the older girl's face crumpled. Sophie looked up at him with those worrying, terrified eyes, and he saw something shift there, a tiny spark of hope, fragile as a candle flame. "Come on," James said, offering his hand to the older girl. "Let's get you somewhere warm." She hesitated, her entire body tensed to run. Then slowly she reached out and placed her small, cold hand in his. James felt the trembling in her fingers, felt how thin and delicate those bones were, how easy it would be for the world to break this child. He would not let that happen. James scooped Sophie up in his other arm. She weighed almost nothing. The stuffed rabbit dangled from her grip, one of its button eyes missing, its fur matted and worn. She tensed at first, then slowly, carefully, let her head rest against his shoulder. They walked to the elevator, this strange trio bound together by chance and desperation. In the harsh fluorescent light, James could see more details. The older girl had a bruise on her arm, partially hidden by her sleeve. Sophie's lips were slightly blue from the cold. Neither had eaten properly in days, that much was obvious. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. They stepped inside and the doors closed, sealing them away from the cold garage and its shadows. James glanced down at the older girl. "I told you my name," he said gently, "but I don't know yours yet." The girl was quiet for a long moment, her hand still in his, her eyes fixed on the ascending floor numbers. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Lily." James nodded. "Lily, that's a beautiful name." He looked down at the child in his arms. "And this is Sophie?" Lily nodded, watching him carefully, still waiting for the trap, the betrayal, the moment when his kindness would reveal itself to be something else entirely. "Well, Lilith and Sophie," James said as the elevator climbed toward the penthouse, "let's get you both somewhere safe." The penthouse was exactly what you would expect from a successful CEO who had stopped caring about warmth. Marble floors, designer furniture in shades of gray and black, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city that sparkled with cold indifference. Abstract art on the walls, expensive and meaningless. Everything was perfect. Everything was empty. The girls stood in the entryway, dwarfed by the space, looking smaller and more lost than they had in the parking garage. Their eyes took in the luxury with a kind of bewildered incomprehension. This was not their world. They did not belong in places like this. James set Sophie down gently and turned on the gas fireplace. Flames sprang to life, instant warmth spreading through the room. He adjusted the thermostat as high as it would go. "Let me get you something to eat," he said, heading to the kitchen. Are you hungry? Stupid question. Of course they were hungry. He could see it in the hollow of their cheeks, the way Lily's eyes tracked toward the kitchen, the way Sophie's small hands clutched her stomach. The kitchen was state-of-the-art and almost entirely unused. James opened cabinet after cabinet, finding nothing appropriate for children. His refrigerator held leftover takeout, craft beer, and the remnants of meals he had barely touched. He finally found a box of crackers, some cheese, and apple juice that he had bought months ago and forgotten about. He arranged everything on a plate, feeling clumsy and inadequate. He had negotiated billion-dollar deals. He had built companies from nothing. But he had no idea how to care for two frightened children. He brought the food to the living room. Lily and Sophie had not moved from where he left them. They stood together, Lily's arms still around her sister, both of them watching him with wary eyes. It's not much, James said, setting the plate on the coffee table. But it's yours if you want it. He sat down in a chair across from the sofa, deliberately putting distance between them, giving them space to feel safe, or as safe as they could feel in a stranger's home. Lily looked at the food, then at James, then at Sophie. She seemed to be calculating something, weighing risks. Finally, she guided Sophie to the sofa and they sat down together, still wrapped in James's coat. Lily took a cracker and handed it to Sophie first. Only after her sister had taken a bite did Lily allow herself to eat. They ate slowly, carefully, like they were afraid the food might disappear if they moved too fast. James watched them, his throat tight with an emotion he could not quite name. Anger, grief, a fierce, protective instinct he had not felt since Sarah died. When Sophie reached for her third cracker, her hand knocked over the juice cup. It spilled across the glass table and Sophie froze. Her entire body went rigid. Her face crumpled, and tears began to stream down her cheeks. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice choked with terror. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Lily immediately pulled her close. It's okay, Sophie. It's okay. But Sophie was crying now, great heaving sobs that shook her tiny frame. He's going to be so mad. He's going to be so mad. James stood up slowly, his hands raised. Hey, Sophie. Sophie, look at me. It took a moment, but the little girl finally looked up, her eyes swimming with tears. It's just juice, James said softly. Nobody's mad. Accidents happen. It's completely okay. He grabbed a kitchen towel and cleaned up the spill, his movements calm and unhurried. When he was done, he poured more juice into the cup and set it carefully in front of Sophie. There, he said. Good as new. You didn't do anything wrong, sweetheart. Nothing at all. Sophie stared at him like he was speaking a foreign language. Slowly, her sobbing quieted to hiccups. Lily watched James with something new in her eyes. Not trust, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of it. They finished eating in silence. When they were done, James brought blankets from the bedroom and arranged them on the sofa. He found a children's movie on the television, some animated thing about talking animals that he hoped might be appropriate. You can sleep here tonight, he said. Tomorrow we'll figure out what to do, but tonight you're safe, I promise. Lily looked at him, those old, tired eyes searching his face. Why are you doing this? She asked again. People don't just help, not for nothing. James sat back down in his chair. You're right, he admitted. Usually they don't. He paused, choosing his words carefully. But sometimes people need to help. Sometimes it's the only way they can save themselves. He did not elaborate. He was not sure he could, even if he wanted to. But something in Lily's expression softened slightly. She nodded just once and settled back against the sofa with Sophie curled against her side. The movie played, colors flickering across their faces. Sophie's eyes began to droop. Within 10 minutes, she was asleep, her small chest rising and falling with each breath. Lily lasted longer, fighting sleep like an enemy, but eventually even she succumbed, her head tilting onto her sister's shoulder. James watched them sleep. He did not move from his chair, could not move. Some part of him was afraid that if he looked away, they would disappear like smoke, and this moment of purpose, of meaning, would vanish with them. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw 3 missed calls from his chief legal officer, 2 from board members, and a string of increasingly urgent text messages about a meeting he had missed. Tomorrow morning there was a presentation that could make or break a $50 million deal. James looked at the messages. Then he looked at the two sleeping children on his sofa. He turned the phone off completely and set it face down on the side table. The city lights glowed beyond the windows, but inside the penthouse, for the first time in 8 months, there was warmth. There was life. There was something worth protecting. James settled deeper into his chair and began his vigil. He would not sleep tonight. He would watch over these children, these strangers who had appeared in his life like an answered prayer he had not known he was praying. In the morning, he would call his friend Maria Santos, a detective with the police department. He would begin to untangle whatever nightmare these girls were running from. He would use every resource at his disposal to keep them safe. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, he simply sat in the darkness and watched two children breathe. Watched them rest without fear for the first time in who knew how long. And in that watching, in that vigil, James Richardson felt something he had not felt since Sarah died. He felt needed. The city outside rushed on, millions of lives intersecting and diverging in the great chaos of existence. But in this penthouse, on this night, 3 lives had collided and fused together. A lonely man, a frightened girl willing to sacrifice herself, and a child small enough to believe that strangers might sometimes be kind. None of them knew it yet, but this was the moment everything changed. This was the night that would define them all. The coldest night of their lives, and somehow, impossibly, the beginning of warmth. Dawn would come soon, bringing with it questions and fears and decisions that could not be unmade. But for now, in these quiet hours before morning, they were simply 3 people seeking shelter from the storm. And that, James thought, as exhaustion finally began to claim him, was enough. It had to be enough. The first light of dawn crept through the floor-to-ceiling windows like an unwelcome witness. James had not slept. He remained in his chair through the long hours of darkness, watching the steady rise and fall of the children's breathing, afraid that if he closed his eyes even for a moment, they would vanish like a fever dream. His back ached, his eyes burned, but he had never felt more awake. Lily stirred first. Her eyes opened slowly, confusion flickering across her face as she took in the unfamiliar surroundings. The luxury penthouse, the warm blankets, the safety. For a brief moment, James saw something young and vulnerable cross her features. Then the walls came back up, and she was once again the child forced to be an adult. She noticed James watching and tensed. "It's okay," he said softly, his voice rough from disuse. "You're still safe. Nothing's changed." Lily sat up carefully, making sure not to wake Sophie. She studied James with those ancient eyes, still calculating, still waiting for the other shoe to drop. Children who had been hurt learned to trust their instincts over their hopes. "I'm going to make some breakfast," James said, standing slowly so as not to startle her. "Do you like eggs?" Lily nodded once, a tiny movement, non-committal. James moved to the kitchen and opened cabinets he barely remembered stocking. He found eggs, bread, butter, the basics. He had not cooked breakfast for anyone since Sarah died. The pan felt foreign in his hands, the act of cracking eggs both familiar and strange, like a skill from another lifetime. He made scrambled eggs, slightly overcooked, toast, slightly burned. He poured orange juice into glasses with hands that were not quite steady. It was not perfect, but it was food and it was warm, and he hoped desperately that it would be enough. The smell of cooking woke Sophie. She sat up suddenly, her eyes wide with panic, that same terror from the night before. Then she saw Lily beside her and relaxed slightly. Her gaze found James in the kitchen, and she pulled her stuffed rabbit close. "Good morning, Sophie," James said gently. "Are you hungry?" Sophie looked at Lily, seeking permission. Lily nodded, and only then did Sophie allow herself to nod as well. They ate at the dining table, a slab of imported marble that had hosted exactly 3 dinner parties in the 2 years James had owned it. The girls sat close together, their bodies touching, seeking comfort in proximity. They ate slowly, carefully, but James noticed they finished everything on their plates. Sophie held her juice cup with both hands, as if afraid it might slip again. When they were done, James cleared the dishes and returned to sit across from them. It was time for answers, time to understand what he had walked into. "Lily," he began, keeping his voice gentle, "can you tell me what happened? Why were you in that parking garage?" Lily's jaw tightened. She looked at Sophie, then at her hands folded on the table. When she spoke, her voice was flat, emotionless, the tone of someone reciting facts too painful to feel. Mom owes money to a man named Victor, she said. Victor Kane. He said if she doesn't pay, he'll take Sophie. He said little girls like Sophie can work off debt. James felt ice crystallize in his veins. Work off debt, he repeated carefully. What does that mean? Lily finally looked up at him, and in her eyes was a knowledge that no child should possess. I know what it means, mister. I'm 7, not stupid. The words hung in the air like smoke from a gun. James swallowed hard against the rage building in his chest. He had spent decades in boardrooms learning to control his emotions, to present a calm facade no matter the provocation. That control was being tested now in ways he had never imagined. Where is your mother? He asked, forcing his voice to remain steady. I don't know, Lily said, and for the first time her composure cracked slightly. She didn't come home 5 days ago. She went to work and never came back. Victor came to our apartment the next day. He was angry. He broke things. He said Mom ran from her debt and now we had to pay. Sophie whimpered softly. Lily immediately put her arm around her sister. He grabbed Sophie, Lily continued, her voice growing quieter. He said he was taking her. So I told him to take me instead. I'm older. I'm worth more, that's what I said. James closed his eyes briefly. The sacrifice, the impossible choice. A 7-year-old child offering herself to a monster to save her baby sister. What happened then? He managed to ask. He laughed, Lily said, and there was such hatred in her voice that James recoiled. He said he'd take both of us, said 2 was better than 1. But then his phone rang and he had to leave. He locked us in the apartment and said he'd come back that night. So we ran. How did you get out? Fire escape. We climbed down. It was really high and Sophie was scared, but we did it. Lily's hand tightened on Sophie's shoulder. We didn't know where to go. We don't have family. Mom always said it was just us 3, so we hid. We hid in alleys and under bridges, and finally we found that garage, and it had a broken lock on the side door. How long were you there? 2 days, maybe 3. I'm not sure anymore. Lily looked down at Sophie. Sophie got really cold. I was scared she would get sick. That's why I asked you to take her. I thought if someone good found her, someone with money who could take care of her, maybe she'd be okay. The simplicity of it, the desperate, heartbreaking logic of a child trying to save the only family she had left. James felt something fundamental shift inside him. Whatever life he had been living before this moment was over. There was only before and after, and he was standing on the knife edge between them. Your mother, he said carefully. What's her full name? Sarah Parker, Lily said. She works at the diner on 5th Street. At least she used to. James nodded slowly. Lily, I need to make some phone calls. I need to find your mother, and I need to make sure that Victor Kane can never hurt you or Sophie again. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Lily studied him for a long moment. You're going to call the police, she said. It was not a question. Yes, but I'm calling a friend, someone I trust, someone who will help. They'll take us away, Lily said, her voice hollow. They'll put us in foster care. They'll split us up. No, James said firmly. That's not going to happen. I won't let it. You can't stop it, Lily said, and she sounded so tired, so much older than 7. That's what happens to kids like us. I know how it works. James leaned forward, his hands flat on the table. Lily, look at me. She did reluctantly. I promise you, he said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. I will not let anyone separate you and Sophie. I will not let Victor Kane touch either of you, and I will find your mother. Do you believe me? Lily wanted to believe. He could see it in her eyes, that desperate need to trust someone, anyone. But she had been betrayed too many times by a world that did not care about children like her. I want to, she whispered, but I don't know how. Then let me show you, James said. Give me a chance to prove it. He stood and retrieved his phone from where he had left it the night before. 47 new messages, 12 missed calls. He ignored all of them and scrolled to a name he had not called in 6 months. Maria Santos. They had met at Columbia, both young and hungry and determined to change the world. Maria became a cop. James became a CEO. They had stayed in touch over the years, that rare kind of friendship that survived diverging paths. She had been at Sarah's funeral, standing in the back, her eyes red but her posture straight. He had not spoken to her since. The phone rang 3 times before she answered. James, she's. Her voice was surprised, cautious. Is everything okay? Maria, I need your help. It's complicated and it's urgent and I can't explain over the phone. Can you come to my place? There was a pause. James, what's going on? Please, he said, and perhaps she heard something in his voice, some edge of desperation he could not quite hide. I need someone I can trust. I need you. Give me 40 minutes, she said, and hung up. James set the phone down and looked at Lily and Sophie. My friend is coming. Her name is Maria. She's a detective, but she's good. She'll help us find your mother and deal with Victor. Lily nodded, but her body language said she did not believe him. Not yet. Trust, he was learning, was not given. It was earned slowly through actions rather than words. The 40 minutes stretched like hours. James showed the girls where the bathroom was, found them clean towels, gave them privacy to wash. When they emerged, their faces scrubbed clean, he could see the full extent of their situation. The bruises on Lily's arms, the hollow look in Sophie's eyes, the way they both startled at sudden sounds. He found some of Sarah's old clothes in boxes he had not been able to bring himself to donate. A soft sweater for Lily, warm socks for both of them. The clothes were too big, but they were clean and warm, and that was what mattered. When Maria arrived, James answered the door before she could knock. She stood in the hallway in her detective's blazer, her dark hair pulled back, her sharp eyes already assessing. Maria, he said, thank you for coming. She stepped inside and immediately saw the 2 girls on the sofa. Her expression flickered with surprise, confusion, then professional neutrality. James, she said carefully, want to tell me what's going on? He told her everything. The parking garage, the plea, the terror in their eyes, Victor Kane, Sarah Parker, the locked apartment, and the fire escape. He laid it all out while Maria listened with the stillness of someone trained to process information quickly and make decisions even faster. When he finished, Maria looked at the girls, then back at James. You know this is complicated, she said quietly, leading him a few steps away so the girls could not hear. These children are technically in danger. Protocol says I should call child services right now. Maria, James said, and there was steel in his voice. Please, give me time. Let me be there for them while you investigate. Don't send them into the system. Not yet. Maria studied his face. You barely know them, James. You found them 12 hours ago. I know, he said, but they need someone, and I need to be that someone, please. She was quiet for a long moment, weighing duty against friendship, protocol against compassion. Finally, she nodded. Okay, she said, but I need to do this right. I'll look for Sarah Parker. I'll investigate Victor Kane. But James, if I find evidence of immediate danger, I'm pulling them out of here, for their safety. Fair enough, James said, relief flooding through him. Maria approached the girls slowly, crouching down to their level. Hi, Lily. Hi, Sophie. My name is Maria. I'm a friend of James, and I'm going to help find your mom. Can you tell me about her? Lily described her mother. Brown hair, green eyes, a small scar on her left hand from a kitchen accident. She worked double shifts at the diner to pay rent. She sang while she cooked. She always made sure Lily and Sophie ate before she did. Maria took notes, her face carefully neutral. Then she asked about Victor Kane. The description that emerged was of a man in his early 40s, tall, muscular, with a tattoo of a snake on his forearm. He drove a black SUV. He always had other men with him. He had come to their apartment 5 times in the last month, each time more aggressive than the last. When Maria was done with her questions, she stood and exchanged a look with James. I'll make some calls, she said. Start with hospitals, then the diner. See what I can find out about Victor Kane. You've given me enough to work with. She moved to the far side of the room and pulled out her phone. James watched her pace, watched her face change as she spoke to various people, her expression growing grimmer with each call. Finally, she returned. James, she said quietly, Can I speak with you privately? They stepped into the hallway outside the penthouse. Maria closed the door behind them. I found her, Maria said, and James's heart leaped. Then he saw Maria's expression and the hope curdled in his chest. She's at County Hospital, admitted 5 days ago under the name Jane Doe, hit-and-run victim. She's been unconscious most of that time. No ID on her when they brought her in. Is she alive? James asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Yes, critical but stable. They've been trying to identify her through fingerprints, but the system has been backed up. Maria paused. James, the hit and run happened 3 blocks from the family's apartment. Witness said a black SUV ran her off the road deliberately and then fled the scene. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Sarah Parker had not abandoned her children. She had been trying to protect them, and Victor Kane had tried to kill her for it. Victor Kane, James said, tell me you can find him. I ran his name. He's got a record. Loan sharking, assault, extortion. 3 priors, but only served time once. Got out 2 years ago. He's connected, James. He's got ties to organized crime, and word is he's got some cops on his payroll. This isn't some street thug we're dealing with. I don't care who he is, James said, his voice low and dangerous. He threatened those girls. He tried to kill their mother. He's not getting near them again. Maria put a hand on his arm. I know, but we need to be smart about this. If he has dirty cops feeding him information, we can't trust the system completely. We need to be careful. What do you suggest? Keep the girls here for now. Don't let anyone know where they are. I'll work on building a case against Victor, see if I can get the prosecutors interested. But James, this could take time. Days, maybe weeks. Then we have time, James said, however long it takes. Maria studied him. You've changed, she said softly. Since Sarah, since everything. You're different. I had to be, James said. I was dying in that old life, just dying slowly, one empty day at a time. These girls, Maria, they need someone, and I need them to need me. Does that make sense? More than you know, Maria said, and there was understanding in her eyes. Okay, I'm going to head to County Hospital, confirm it's their mother, make sure she's protected. I'll post a uniform outside her door, someone I trust. Then I'll start digging into Victor Kane. You stay here with the girls. Don't go to work. Don't leave them alone, not for a second. I won't, James promised. They returned to the penthouse. James knelt down in front of Lily and Sophie, his heart pounding. We found her, he said, and watched hope bloom on Lily's face for the first time. Your mother is in the hospital. She's hurt, but she's alive, and she's going to... Okay. Lily's composure finally shattered. She began to cry, great heaving sobs that shook her thin frame. Sophie started crying too, not fully understanding but feeding off her sister's emotion. James pulled them both close, these children who were strangers 12 hours ago, and now felt like his entire world. Can we see her? Lily asked through her tears. Please, can we see her? James looked at Maria. She nodded slowly. Yes, James said. We'll go today, I promise. County Hospital was a monument to underfunding and overwork. The walls were painted in shades of institutional beige. The fluorescent lights hummed with the sound that set teeth on edge. The smell of disinfectant and despair hung thick in the recycled air. James held Sophie in one arm and Lily's hand with the other as Maria led them through the maze of corridors. The nurses' station on the 4th floor was chaos. Overworked staff moved with the frantic energy of people trying to save lives with insufficient resources. Maria flashed her badge and spoke quietly to a nurse who checked a computer and pointed down a hallway. Room 417. The walk down that corridor felt like miles. Lily's hand tightened in James's grip with each step. Sophie buried her face in his shoulder. When they reached the door, Maria stopped them. She's going to look different, Maria said gently, speaking directly to the girls. She has some injuries, some bandages, medical equipment, but it's still your mom, okay? She's still in there. Lily nodded, her face pale but determined. I want to see her. Maria pushed open the door. The woman in the bed was almost unrecognizable. Her face was swollen and bruised, yellowing around the edges where older injuries were healing. Her left arm was in a cast. Wires and tubes connected her to machines that beeped with mechanical regularity. Her brown hair was matted against the pillow. But when Lily saw her, she pulled free from James's grip and ran to the bedside. "Mommy," Lily whispered, her voice breaking on the word. "Mommy, please wake up." Sarah Parker's eyes fluttered. Slowly, painfully, they opened. Confusion clouded her features for a moment. Then she saw Lily, and something fundamental shifted. Her cracked lips moved, forming words that barely made sound. "Lily, baby, is that you?" "I'm here, Mommy," Lily sobbed. "We're here. Me and Sophie. We're okay." Sarah's eyes found Sophie in James's arms, and tears began to stream down her bruised face. "My babies," she whispered. "My sweet babies." "How?" James approached slowly and set Sophie down gently on the edge of the bed. Sophie crawled forward carefully, avoiding the tubes and wires, and pressed her small body against her mother's side. "We're okay, Mommy," Sophie said, her voice muffled. "A nice man found us. He kept us safe." Sarah's gaze shifted to James, taking him in. The expensive clothes, the careful posture, the way he stood protectively near her children. Questions flickered across her face, but before she could speak, Lily was talking again. "Victor came, Mommy. He said he was going to take us. But we ran away, and James found us, and he's been keeping us safe, and Detective Maria found you, and we were so scared you were dead." The words tumbled out in a rush, a dam breaking after days of holding everything inside. Sarah listened, her hand reaching weakly to stroke Lily's hair, her eyes never leaving her daughter's faces. When Lily finally ran out of words, Sarah looked at James again. "Thank you," she whispered, and the inadequacy of those two words hung in the air between them. "I don't know who you are, but thank you for protecting my girls." "James Richardson," he said quietly, "and I'm going to keep protecting them. All of you, for as long as it takes, Ramon." Sarah's eyes searched his face, looking for the lie, the angle, the price. She had learned to trust nothing and no one. But whatever she saw in James's expression made something in her relax slightly. "Victor," she said, her voice stronger now, urgent. "You have to understand he's dangerous. He has people everywhere. You can't just hide from him. He'll find you. He always finds you." "Let me worry about Victor," James said. "Right now, you need to focus on getting better. The girls need their mother." Sarah tried to sit up and gasped in pain. "You don't understand. He ran me off the road. He tried to kill me because I couldn't pay. $50,000. That's what I owed him. It started as $5,000 for Sophie's hospital bills when she was born, but with his interest, it grew and grew, and I couldn't ever catch up." "How much do you owe now?" James asked. "200,000, Sarah said, and her voice broke. "I'll never have that kind of money. Never. And he said if I couldn't pay, he'd take my girls. He said little girls were valuable. He said he knew people who would pay good money for children like mine." The horror of it settled over the room like a shroud. Maria's jaw tightened. James felt rage building in his chest, white hot and barely controlled. "He's not getting them," James said, his voice flat and hard. "Whatever it takes, whatever I have to do, he's not getting them." Sarah looked at him, and in her eyes was the same desperate hope James had seen in Lily's face. The need to believe that someone, somewhere, might actually help. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this? You don't know us. We're nothing to you." James thought about that question, about the parking garage and Lily's impossible sacrifice, about the way Sophie had finally relaxed in his arms and called him a nice man, about the 8 months of grief and emptiness that had hollowed him out until he was barely human. "Because someone should," he said simply. "Because you deserve help. Because your daughters deserve to be safe. And because for the first time since my wife died, I feel like I have a reason to get up in the morning." The truth of it hung in the air. Sarah began to cry, the tears mixing with the pain medication and exhaustion. Lily and Sophie clung to her, careful of her injuries but desperate for contact. Maria touched James's arm and nodded toward the door. They stepped outside, leaving the family their moment. "I called in a favor," Maria said quietly. "Got a uniform I trust watching her door. His name is Officer Chen, been on the force 20 years, clean as they come. If Victor or any of his people try to get to her, Chen will stop them." "Good," James said. "What about building a case?" "I'm working on it. Hit and run with witnesses, that's attempted murder. The loan sharking, The threats against minors, that's multiple felonies. But James, guys like Victor, they're slippery. He'll have lawyers. He'll have alibis. We need concrete evidence, and that takes time. How much time? Days, maybe weeks. And in the meantime, he's going to be looking for those girls, looking hard. James watched through the door window as Sarah held her daughters. Then we disappear, he said, all of us. I have a place, a house on Folly Beach in South Carolina. It's remote, secure, has a good security system. We take them there. Let Sarah recover somewhere safe while you build your case. That's a long way from New York, Maria said. You'd have to leave everything. Your company, your responsibilities. I know, James said, and he found he did not care. Not even a little bit. Some things matter more. Maria studied him for a long moment. You're serious about this, about them. More serious than I've been about anything in my life. She nodded slowly. Okay, give me 2 days to get some preliminary evidence gathered. Then you take them south and you stay there until I call you. Don't tell anyone where you're going, not your board, not your friends, no one. Just disappear. 2 days, James agreed. They returned to the hospital room. Sarah had managed to sit up slightly, propped by pillows, her daughters on either side of her like small anchors holding her to the world. She looked at James as he entered. The detective told me what you're planning, she said, taking us somewhere safe. I can't let you do that. You've done too much already. Sarah, James said gently, your daughters asked me for help. I said yes. I don't say things I don't mean. But your life, your work, will still be there when this is over. Or it won't, and that will be fine too. He pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. I spent the last 8 months of my wife's life at the office, closing deals while she died alone in a hospital, not unlike this one. I told myself I was building something important, something that mattered. But she needed me, and I wasn't there. His voice caught, but he pushed through. I can't undo that. I can't bring her back or make up for those lost hours. But I can be here now, for you and Lily and Sophie. I can make sure Victor Kane doesn't hurt anyone else. Let me do this, please. Sarah reached out with her good hand and placed it over James's. Her touch was light, weak from injury and medication, but the gesture carried weight. Okay, she whispered. Okay. They stayed at the hospital until visiting hours ended. James made arrangements for Sarah's continued care, speaking to doctors, ensuring she had everything she needed. He paid her outstanding medical bills without mentioning it, cleared the debts that had accumulated during her unconscious days. When it was time to leave, Lily and Sophie were reluctant to let go of their mother. It took gentle coaxing to get them to release their grip. I'll see you tomorrow, Sarah promised, and soon we'll all be together somewhere safe, I promise. In the car on the Wawag to the penthouse, Sophie fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted by emotion. Lily stayed awake, staring out the window at the city lights. James, she said quietly. Yes? Why did that man hurt my mom? James considered his answer carefully. Because some people believe that money is more important than people. They forget that every debt, every transaction involves human beings with feelings and families and lives. Do you believe that? I used to, James admitted. I used to think success meant profit margins and stock prices, but I was wrong. Success means the people you protect, the promises you keep, the love you give and receive. Lily was quiet for a moment. Sophie called you daddy at the hospital, she said. I heard her. I know, James said. Is that okay? I don't know yet, Lily said honestly. My real dad left before Sophie was born. I don't remember him much. Mom said he wasn't ready to be a father. Being a father isn't about biology, James said. It's about showing up. It's about being there when you're needed. Will you? Lily asked, and her voice was so small, so vulnerable. Will you be there? James pulled the car to the side of the road and turned to face her fully. Lily, I promise you, on everything I hold sacred, I will be there. For you and for Sophie and for your mother. Whatever comes, whatever it takes, I'm not going anywhere. Lily looked at him for a long moment, then slowly she nodded. Not trust, not yet, but the beginning of it, the first fragile foundation. They drove the rest of the way in silence. Back at the penthouse, James carried Sophie to the sofa and tucked her in. Lily climbed in beside her sister, and James covered them both with blankets. As he turned to leave, Lily's voice stopped him. James, thank you for everything. He looked back at her. You're welcome, Lily. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's a big day. In his own bedroom, James finally allowed himself to collapse. His phone showed 73 new messages, 18 missed calls. His board was probably in full panic mode. Deals were falling apart. Shareholders were demanding answers. He turned the phone off again and lay in the darkness. Somewhere in the city, Victor Kane was searching for two little girls. Somewhere, Sarah Parker was lying in a hospital bed, healing from injuries meant to kill her. Somewhere, the machinery of justice was slowly grinding toward action. But here, in this moment, James Richardson was exactly where he needed to be, protecting people who needed protection, keeping promises that mattered, living a life that meant something more than profit and loss. For the first time since Sarah died, James Richardson was not alone in his grief. He had purpose. He had meaning. He had two little girls sleeping in his living room who had reminded him that the world could still be saved, one act of kindness at a time. Outside, the city never slept. Inside, for a few precious hours, they were all safe. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Victor Kane would not give up easily. The logistics of disappearing would be complex. Sarah's recovery would be slow. There would be legal battles and dangerous confrontations and moments when everything seemed impossible. But tonight they had won something. Not the war, but a battle. And sometimes, James thought as sleep finally claimed him, that was enough. It had to be enough. The 2 days that followed moved with the strange duality of time under pressure, each hour crawling by with excruciating slowness while simultaneously vanishing in a blur of preparation and planning. James had become a different man, moving through his penthouse with purpose that had nothing to do with quarterly earnings or board meetings. His world had contracted to 3 people who needed him, and everything else had faded to background noise. Maria called on the morning of the second day, her voice tight with controlled urgency. I've got what we need to move, she said without preamble. Witness statements on the hit and run, financial records showing Victor's loan sharking operation, testimony from 2 other victims willing to go on record. The DA is interested, James, really interested, but it's going to take time to build an airtight case, and Victor knows we're circling. His lawyer already called, fishing for information. Which means he knows we're coming for him, James said, watching Lily and Sophie color at the dining table, their heads bent close together in the morning light. Exactly. And if he knows that, he knows those girls are witnesses. Loose ends, James, you need to move them today, now. Sarah's doctor said she can be discharged this afternoon if she has somewhere stable to recover. I've arranged for a private medical transport. Good, I've got a route plan that avoids toll cameras. Take back roads once you're out of the city. I'm assigning someone to Sarah's room until the moment she leaves, and I'll have a patrol follow you to the state line. After that, you're on your own until I can make arrests. How long? Week, maybe 2. Victor's got resources, but he's getting sloppy. Desperate men make mistakes. We'll get him, James, I promise you that. After the call ended, James stood at the window looking out at the city that had been his kingdom. Down there in glass towers and concrete canyons, his empire was crumbling. His CFO had sent increasingly frantic messages. The board had called an emergency meeting. Shareholders were demanding explanations for his absence. $100 million merger was dying on the vine because he was not there to close it. He felt nothing. No regret, no anxiety, no pull to return to that life. It belonged to a different James Richardson, one who had died in a parking garage 2 nights ago when a little girl asked him to save her sister. James? Lily's voice pulled him from his thoughts. She stood beside him, a crayon still clutched in her hand. Are you okay? He looked down at her, this child who had seen too much and grown up too fast. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just thinking. About the bad man? He should have known she would understand. Children who had lived with fear developed an instinct for it, could smell it on adults like smoke. Yes, he admitted, about keeping you safe. Lily was quiet for a moment, her old eyes studying his face. My mom used to get that look, when she was scared but trying not to show it. You don't have to hide from us. We know what scared looks like. James knelt down to her level. You're right, I am scared. But not the way you think. I'm not scared of Victor. I'm scared of failing you and Sophie and your mother. Of not being good enough to keep my promises. That's the difference, Lily said with wisdom beyond her years. Bad scared is when you're scared for yourself. Good scared is when you're scared for other people. Mom taught me that. James felt something crack open in his chest. Your mother is a very wise woman. She tries, Lily said simply. When are we going to get her? This afternoon. We're going to take her somewhere safe, somewhere Victor can't find any of you. A house by the ocean. Have you ever seen the ocean, Lily? She shook her head. Only in pictures. It's beautiful, James said, powerful and peaceful at the same time. I think you'll like it. Will you stay with us? Every day, James promised, for as long as you need me. Lily studied him for another moment, then nodded and returned to the table where Sophie was creating an elaborate drawing of what appeared to be a house with too many windows and a sun that took up half the skyline. James watched them, these two children who had wandered into his life and changed everything, and felt the weight of responsibility settle more firmly on his shoulders. He would not fail them, could not fail them. Failure was not an option. The rest of the morning passed in controlled chaos. James packed with efficiency born of years of business travel, but this time the suitcases held children's clothes hastily purchased, stuffed animals, coloring books, things that mattered more than Italian suits and silk ties. He closed out his penthouse, leaving instructions with his building manager that no one, absolutely no one, was to be given information about his whereabouts. His phone rang constantly. He ignored every call that was not Maria. His inbox overflowed with increasingly desperate messages from his company. He deleted them without reading. There would be consequences. His position as CEO was probably already being discussed in closed-door meetings. His reputation would take hits he might never recover from. None of it mattered. Not anymore. Not compared to the sight of Sophie carefully packing her worn stuffed rabbit, or Lily making sure they had enough of the cracker Sophie liked. These small human moments were worth more than every dollar in his considerable fortune. At noon, Maria called again. Medical transport is ready. I've got Officer Chen in another uniform I trust. Rodriguez escorting Sarah out of the hospital. Black SUV in the underground garage, tinted windows, no markings. You meet them there, transfer to your vehicle, and you go. Don't stop until you're at least 200 miles south. Understood. James, Maria's voice softened slightly. What you're doing, it's not going to be easy. Victor Kane is connected. Even if we arrest him, his people might still come looking. You could be protecting these girls for months, maybe longer. Are you ready for that? Yes, James said without hesitation. I am. Okay then, be safe. And James, call me when you're secure. I'll sleep better knowing you made it. The underground garage of County Hospital was a concrete maze painted in harsh yellows and institutional grays. James pulled his Mercedes into a spot near the elevator bank and waited. Lily and Sophie in the back seat, both children unnaturally quiet with the tension of the moment. The minutes stretched. James checked his watch, checked his mirrors, checked his watch again. Then the elevator doors opened, and Maria emerged first, her hand resting casually on her hip where her service weapon sat. Behind her came Officer Chen, pushing a wheelchair, and in that wheelchair, looking small and fragile but alive, was Sarah Parker. Officer Rodriguez brought up the rear, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. James got out and opened the back door. Lily and Sophie scrambled out and ran to their mother, their movements careful but desperate. Sarah opened her arms as much as her injuries allowed, and the three of them held each other while James and the officers formed a protective circle around them. We need to move, Maria said quietly. There was a car circling the hospital entrance. Black Escalade, 2 men inside. Could be nothing, but I don't believe in coincidences. James felt ice in his veins. Victor's people? Maybe, or I'm paranoid. Either way, we go now. They transferred Sarah to James's car with practiced efficiency. She winced with pain but did not cry out. Lily and Sophie climbed in on either side of their mother, creating a protective cocoon. James closed the door and turned to Maria. Thank you, he said, for everything. "Don't thank me yet," she replied. "Get them out of here. Get them safe. I'll handle the rest." She pressed something into his hand, a burner phone, cheap and untraceable. "My number's programmed in. This is your only line of communication with me until this is over. Use it sparingly. Trust no one else." James nodded and got into the driver's seat. The Mercedes engine purred to life, all German engineering and restrained power. He pulled out of the parking spot and headed for the exit ramp. In his rearview mirror, he saw Maria and the two officers standing guard until he was out of sight. The drive out of the city felt like escaping a prison. Every red light was an opportunity for ambush. Every car that followed for more than 2 blocks sent James's heart racing. But slowly, block by block, mile by mile, the urban density gave way to suburbs, then to rural highways cutting through October forests ablaze with autumn color. Sarah spoke for the first time an hour into the drive, her voice weak but determined. "You're really doing this," she said, "leaving everything behind for us." "Yes," James replied simply. "Why I keep asking, but I don't understand the answer. People don't do things like this, not in the real world." James glanced in the rearview mirror. Lily was awake, listening. Sophie had fallen asleep against her mother's side, one small hand clutching Sarah's shirt. "In the real world," James said carefully, "most people are too afraid to do the right thing. They tell themselves they can't afford it, can't risk it, can't spare the time. I was one of those people for most of my life. I built companies while my wife needed me. I closed deals while she was dying. I convinced myself that success in business was the same as success in life." He paused, organizing thoughts he had not fully articulated even to himself. "But success is not measured in profit margins or stock portfolios. It's measured in the promises you keep and the people you protect. Your daughter asked me to save her sister. She was willing to sacrifice herself at 7 years old to keep Sophie safe. How could I say no to that? How could I walk away from that kind of love and still call myself human?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. "My ex-husband, the girl's father, he left when I was 6 months pregnant with Sophie, said he wasn't ready for the responsibility. That fatherhood wasn't what he signed up for. He walked away and never looked back." "I'm sorry," James said. "Don't be. He showed me who he was, and I believed him. But you, James Richardson, you're showing me something I didn't think existed anymore. Men who keep their promises. Men who protect instead of prey. Men who understand that strength isn't about taking what you want. It's about defending what matters." "Your daughters matter," James said firmly. "You matter, and I will defend all of you with everything I have." Lily leaned forward, her small hand resting on James's shoulder. She did not speak, but the gesture said what words could not. Trust, fragile and new, beginning to take root. They stopped once for gas and food at a lonely rest stop somewhere in Virginia. James filled the tank while Sarah watched from the car, her eyes scanning every vehicle, every person, looking for threats. They ate pre-packaged sandwiches and drank bad coffee from the vending machines. A strange little family bound together by circumstance and choice. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, they crossed into South Carolina. The landscape changed, becoming more coastal, the air carrying the salt tang of the ocean still miles away. James felt something loosen in his chest. They were going to make it. They were going to be safe, at least for now. Folly Beach appeared as the last light was fading from the sky. The house James owned here was a remnant from his marriage, a place Sarah had loved for summer vacations they never seemed to have time to take. It sat on a quiet street 3 blocks from the water, a 2-story coastal cottage with weathered gray shingles and wide porches designed for watching storms roll in from the Atlantic. James had not been here since Sarah died. He had almost sold it a dozen times but could never bring himself to make the call. Now, pulling into the driveway with 3 people depending on him, he understood why. This house had been waiting for a purpose, waiting to be more than a monument to lost happiness. He helped Sarah from the car, supporting her weight as she took slow, careful steps. Lily and Sophie ran ahead, their energy returning now that the long drive was over. James unlocked the door and they tumbled inside, their voices echoing in the empty rooms. The house was exactly as he remembered. Coastal furniture in blues and whites, large windows overlooking a small yard, and, beyond it, the suggestion of ocean. Hardwood floors that creaked in familiar patterns. It smelled of salt air and disuse, but underneath that was something else. Memory, possibility. Sarah stood in the living room, taking it in. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "It was my wife's favorite place," James replied, helping her to the sofa. "She always said it felt like stepping out of time, like the rest of the world couldn't quite reach you here." "I hope she was right," Sarah said, easing herself down with a grimace of pain. God, I hope she was right. The next hours were spent in domestic tasks that felt both foreign and right. James found linens in the closet and made beds. He stocked the kitchen from supplies he had ordered ahead, delivered that morning by a local service. Lily helped, moving with the practiced efficiency of a child who had taken care of adults too often. Sophie explored every room, her stuffed rabbit clutched tight, testing the safety of this new place one corner at a time. They ate dinner together at the kitchen table, simple pasta and salad, and for a little while they were just a family. Not running, not hiding, just eating and talking about small things. Sophie described her drawing from that morning in elaborate detail. Lily asked questions about the ocean. Sarah smiled more than James had seen since meeting her, the lines of pain around her eyes easing slightly. After dinner, James helped Sarah to the downstairs bedroom. She had insisted Lily and Sophie take the room next to his upstairs, wanting them close to someone who could protect them if danger came in the night. James understood. Trust was still new, still fragile, but it was growing. "Thank you," Sarah said as James helped her settle into bed. "For all of this, for not thinking I'm crazy for being so paranoid, for understanding why I need the girls close to you." "You're not crazy," James said. "You're a mother protecting her children. That's the sanest thing in the world." Sarah looked at him, really looked, and James saw her the way she must have been before Victor Kane and crushing debt and fear for her children's lives. She was beautiful in the way that strength and resilience are beautiful. Not the polished beauty of magazine covers, but something deeper, more real. "Your wife," Sarah said quietly. "She was lucky to have you." "No," James said, and the old guilt rose up. "I was never there when she needed me. I failed her in every way that mattered." "But you learned," Sarah said. "That's what makes the difference. You learned and now you're here, you're present. You're protecting people who need you. That's not failure, James, that's redemption." The word hung in the air between them. Redemption. James had not thought of it that way, but perhaps Sarah was right. Perhaps this was his chance to atone for the hours he could never get back. The deathbed he had not sat beside, the hand he had not held while his wife slipped away. "Get some rest," he said, his voice rough. "You're safe here, I promise you that." Upstairs, he found Lily and Sophie in their shared room. Lily had pulled the beds together, creating one large sleeping space. Sophie was already asleep, her breathing deep and even. Lily sat awake, watching her sister with those old, careful eyes. "Can't sleep?" James asked quietly from the doorway. Lily shook her head. "I keep thinking he'll find us, that we'll wake up and he'll be here." James entered and sat on the edge of the bed. "Victor can't find you here. This house is in a trust, not under my name. No one except Detective Santos knows where we are. And if somehow, against all odds, he did find us, I wouldn't let him near you. I'd protect you with my life, Lily. Do you believe that?" She studied him, weighing his words against a lifetime of broken promises from adults. "I think I do," she said finally, "which is weird because I never believe anyone. But you're different. You do what you say you're going to do." "Always," James promised. "Now try to sleep. Tomorrow we'll go see the ocean. Would you like that?" "Yeah," Lily said, a small smile touching her lips. "Yeah, I would." James stood to leave, but Lily's voice stopped him. "James, Sophie called you Daddy again today. In the car. She was half asleep and she said, 'Daddy's keeping us safe. Is that okay?'" James felt his throat tighten. "Is it okay with you?" "I don't know yet," Lily said honestly, "but maybe it will be. Someday." "That's enough," James said. More than enough. He retreated to his own room, the master bedroom at the end of the hall. The burner phone Maria had given him sat on the nightstand. He sent a single text. "We're here. We're safe." The reply came seconds later. "Good. Stay that way. I'll be in touch." James lay in bed, listening to the house settle around him. The creak of wood, the whisper of wind off the ocean, the soft breathing of two children sleeping down the hall. For 8 months he had been alone in the dark, haunted by absence. Now the house was full of life, of people who needed him, and the darkness felt less absolute. He thought of Victor Kane somewhere in New York, searching, planning, growing more desperate. He thought of Maria working to build a case strong enough to put him away forever. He thought of the company he had abandoned and the life he had left behind. None of it seemed real anymore. This was real. This house, these people, these promises that could not be broken. James Richardson, CEO, was gone. In his place was simply James, protector, guardian, the man who had said yes when a little girl asked for help. He could live with that, more than live with it. He could build a life on it. Sleep came slowly, but when it did, for the first time in months, it was not haunted by regret. The morning brought sunshine and the cry of seagulls. James woke to the smell of coffee and found Sarah in the kitchen, moving carefully but managing, determination etched in every line of her body. "You should be resting," he said. "I've been resting for 5 days in a hospital bed," she replied. "I need to move, to do something, to feel useful. Besides, someone needs to feed these girls properly." As if summoned by the mention of food, Lily and Sophie appeared, hair tangled from sleep, eyes bright with the resilience of childhood. They ate breakfast together, eggs and toast, nothing fancy but made with care. The morning felt almost normal, almost peaceful, and James allowed himself to hope that peace might last. After breakfast, they walked to the beach. Sarah insisted she could make it, and though James watched her carefully, she managed the 3 blocks with only a few rests. The ocean stretched before them, vast and gray-green under an overcast sky, waves rolling in with patient, eternal rhythm. Sophie saw it first and screamed with pure joy. She ran toward the water, Lily chasing after her, both girls laughing. James stayed close to Sarah, ready to catch her if she stumbled. But she was transfixed by the sight of her daughters playing, truly playing, without fear for the first time in months. "Look at them," she whispered. "I'd forgotten they could be like this. Just children. Just happy." "They're safe here," James said. "They can be children again." They stood watching as Lily and Sophie chased waves, shrieking when the cold water touched their toes. Sophie found a shell and brought it to James like a treasure. Lily built a small castle, her hands working with concentration and care. For hours they stayed there, the four of them, and James felt something settle into place. This was what he had been missing. Not success or achievement or wealth, connection, purpose, being present for people who needed him present. The burner phone vibrated in his pocket. He checked it discreetly. Maria. Development. Victor's apartment was raided this morning. Found evidence of money laundering, trafficking, connections. "He's in the wind. Warrant issued. He knows we're coming." James's blood ran cold. Victor, desperate and cornered, the most dangerous kind of criminal. He looked at Sarah and the girls, still playing in the sand, unaware of the storm gathering in the north. He would keep them safe, whatever it took, however long it took. The peaceful morning suddenly felt fragile, precious, temporary. But James pushed the fear away. They had today. They had this moment, and he would fight to give them tomorrow and the day after, and every day until Victor Kane was behind bars where he belonged. "Look, Daddy," Sophie called, using the name she had decided James had earned. "Look at what I found." She held up a piece of sea glass, worn smooth by waves and time. It was blue, translucent, catching the light. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," James called back, and meant it. Beautiful and fragile and worth protecting. Just like the children who had changed his life in a parking garage on the coldest night of the year. The days that follow fell into a rhythm, careful and deliberate. James established routines designed to give the girls structure while keeping them safe. Breakfast together every morning. Lessons at the kitchen table where Lily helped Sophie with letters and numbers. Afternoons exploring the beach, building sandcastles, collecting shells. Evenings cooking simple meals and reading stories before bed. Sarah grew stronger daily. The bruises faded from purple to yellow. She moved with less pain, smiled more easily. Sometimes James would catch her watching him with an expression he could not quite read. Gratitude, certainly. But something else too. Something that made his pulse quicken in ways it had not since his wife died. They did not speak of it. There were more pressing concerns. The burner phone brought updates from Maria every few days. Victor Kane had vanished, gone to ground like a wounded animal. His organization was crumbling under investigation. 3 of his associates had been arrested. Victims were coming forward. The case was building, slowly but steadily. But Victor himself remained at large. And until he was caught, none of them were truly safe. A week after they arrived at Folly Beach, the dynamic shifted. James was in the kitchen making lunch when Sarah appeared, leaning against the doorframe. She had showered, her damp hair falling around her shoulders, and she wore clothes that actually fit, purchased from a local shop during one of James's careful, watchful trips into town. "The girls are drawing upstairs," she said. "Sophie is explaining her entire imaginary world to Lily, who is pretending to be interested while secretly working on her math." James smiled. "Lily takes her responsibilities seriously." "Too seriously for a 7-year-old. Oh, then," Sarah said, her voice touched with sadness. "She's had to be the adult for too long. She's safe now. She can be a kid again. Because of you." Sarah moved closer, and James was suddenly aware of the intimacy of the moment. The quiet house, the 2 of them alone in the kitchen, the way the light caught in her hair. "I need to tell you something," Sarah said, her voice soft but steady. "Something I haven't been able to say." James set down the knife he had been using to slice vegetables. "I'm listening." "When Victor ran me off the road, in those moments when the car was spinning and I thought I was going to die, my only thought was my girls. What would happen to them? Who would protect them? I was so scared, James, not of dying, but of leaving them alone in the world with no one to keep them safe." She paused, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "And then I woke up in that hospital and they told me my children were fine, that a stranger had found them and kept them safe. And I thought it was a dream, or a lie, because people like you don't exist. Men who help for no reason, who sacrifice everything, who step into someone else's nightmare and decide to stay." "Sarah," James began, but she held up her hand. "Let me finish, please." She took a breath. "You could have called the police and walked away. You could have handed them over to the system and gone back to your life. But you didn't. You stayed. You protected them. You protected me. And I need you to know that what you've done, what you're doing, it's not just saving our lives. It's teaching my daughters that good people exist, that men can be protectors instead of predators, that promises can be kept and trust can be earned." A tear escaped and ran down her cheek. James reached out instinctively and caught it with his thumb, his hand lingering against her face. "You're teaching them hope," Sarah whispered, "and that's the greatest gift you could ever give them." They stood frozen in that moment, James's hand against Sarah's cheek, her eyes locked on his, something electric and terrifying passing between them. This was more than gratitude, more than proximity born of crisis. This was recognition. 2 damaged people finding something unexpected in each other. The moment broke when Sophie's voice called from upstairs. "Daddy, Mommy, come see what I drew." James dropped his hand. Sarah stepped back, both of them flushed, breathing slightly faster. "We should go see," Sarah said. "Yes," James agreed, his voice rougher than usual. "We should." They climbed the stairs together, carefully maintaining distance, and entered the girls' room. Sophie had created an elaborate drawing of a house by the ocean. 4 stick figures stood in front of it, holding hands. She had labeled them in careful letters. Mommy, Lily, Sophie, Daddy. James stared at that drawing, at the way Sophie had drawn them all the same height, because, in her world, they were equal, all equally important, all equally loved. His vision blurred slightly. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "The most beautiful thing I've ever seen." "Can we stay here forever?" Sophie asked, looking up at James with those hazy but hopeful eyes. "In this house? All of us together?" James knelt down to her level. "Would you like that?" "Yes," Sophie threw her arms around his neck. "I like it here. I'm not scared here. And you're here, so we're safe." Over Sophie's shoulder, James saw Lily watching him. She had not joined the hug, still maintaining that careful distance. But something in her expression had softened. "I think I'm ready." she said quietly. Ready for what, sweetheart? Sarah asked. Lily walked over and wrapped her arms around James from the side, pressing her face against his shoulder. Ready to call you Dad, if that's okay. James felt something break open in his chest, some last wall of resistance crumbling. He wrapped both girls in his arms, holding them close, and over their heads his eyes met Sarah's. She was crying openly now and smiling, and in that moment James understood what his life had become. A family, not bound by blood but by choice and protection and promises kept. A family forged in crisis and sealed in love. It's more than okay, he said, his voice rough with emotion. It's everything. They stayed like that, the four of them, while outside the ocean rolled on, and somewhere far away, Maria worked to end the threat that still hung over them. But in this moment, in this room, they were complete. They were whole. They were home. The burner phone buzzed in James's pocket, shattering the peace. He released the girls and checked the message, his heart already sinking with the premonition of bad news. Maria, problem. Victor has help. Someone leaked your location. You need to move. Now. James looked up at Sarah and saw understanding dawn in her eyes. She had seen his expression change, had spent enough time running to recognize the signs of danger. He found us, she said flatly. We need to go, James confirmed. Already moving, his mind racing through options. Pack only essentials. 5 minutes. We leave in 5 minutes. The peace they had built shattered like glass. Lily grabbed Sophie and pulled her close, that old protective instinct returning in an instant. Sarah moved to help them pack, fighting through pain and fear. James called Maria on the burner phone. How close? He asked without preamble. I don't know. The leak came from inside. Someone I thought I could trust. James, you need to assume they know exactly where you are right now. Get out. Get somewhere public. Somewhere with cameras and witnesses. I'm sending backup, but they're 2 hours away. 2 hours, James repeated, looking out the window at the quiet street. We'll be gone in 5 minutes. James, Maria said, her voice urgent. Victor is cornered and desperate. He's got nothing to lose. If he comes for you, he won't care about collateral damage. Do whatever you have to do to protect those girls, whatever it takes. I will, James promised, and ended the call. He grabbed his car keys and wallet, looked around the house that had briefly been a home, knowing they might never return, knowing that peace, however temporary, was over. Sarah appeared with the girls, each carrying a small bag. Lily held Sophie's hand. Both children were pale but composed. No tears, no panic. They had done this before. They knew how to run. Where do we go? Sarah asked. James thought fast. Public place, cameras, witnesses. The mall in Charleston, 40 minutes away. Lots of people, security, multiple exits. We lose ourselves in the crowd while Maria's backup arrives. And if he finds us there? James met her eyes. Then I stop him, whatever it takes. Well, they piled into the Mercedes, James helping Sarah into the passenger seat, while the girls scrambled into the back. He pulled out of the driveway and onto the quiet street, his eyes scanning every parked car, every shadow. 3 blocks from the house, he saw it. A black Escalade, parked on a side street, its engine running. Get down, James said sharply. Sarah, get the girls down, now. Sarah moved immediately, pulling both children onto the floor of the back seat, covering them with her own body. James accelerated, watching the rearview mirror. The Escalade pulled out and began following them. No more pretense. No more hiding. Victor Kane had found them, and now it was a race James had to win because losing meant the death or disappearance of 3 people he had sworn to protect. The chase was on, and James Richardson, former CEO and current guardian, pressed the accelerator to the floor and prepared to fight for his family with everything he had. The Mercedes surged forward, its powerful engine responding instantly. James took the turn onto the main road hard, tires squealing, his hands steady on the wheel despite the adrenaline flooding his system. In the rearview mirror, the black Escalade followed, closing the distance with terrifying speed. Stay down, James commanded, his voice calm despite the chaos. Whatever happens, you stay down. Sarah's voice came from the back seat, steady and strong. We trust you, James. Keep us safe. The words anchored him, gave him purpose. He had spent his life making decisions in boardrooms where millions of dollars hung in the balance. But this was different. This was life and death. This was everything that mattered. James pushed the Mercedes faster, the coastal highway unwinding before him. He needed to reach Charleston, reach crowds and safety. 40 minutes had never seemed so far. Behind him, the Escalade kept pace, and somewhere in that vehicle, James knew, was Victor Kane. Desperate, dangerous, and determined to eliminate the witnesses who could destroy him. But James Richardson was equally determined. He had made a promise in a parking garage on the coldest night of his life, a promise to protect two little girls who needed protection. And James Richardson always kept his promises. The road stretched ahead, and James drove into the gathering storm, 3 lives depending on his skill, his courage, his resolve. The peace was over. The fight had begun, and James could not lose. Not today, never. Much for the Mercedes screamed into the parking lot of Town Center Mall, tires smoking as James executed a perfect drift into a space near the main entrance. He killed the engine and turned to the back seat. We run. Together. Don't let go of each other. Straight to the security office. They burst from the car as the Escalade roared into the lot. James held Sophie, Sarah gripped Lily, and they ran. Behind them, car doors slammed, heavy footsteps. There! A man's voice. Rough, angry. The automatic doors slid open. James pushed through the crowd, scanning for security. Mall shoppers stared as they ran past, a desperate family fleeing invisible danger. Then James saw him. Victor Kane stepped from behind a pillar, blocking their path. Tall, muscular, the snake tattoo visible on his forearm. His eyes were cold, calculating, predatory. End of the line, Richardson, Victor said, his voice carrying threat like a weapon. You've caused me a lot of problems. James set Sophie down behind him, positioning himself between Victor and his family. Around them, shoppers began to back away, sensing danger. It's over, Victor, James said, his voice steady despite the fear. The police are coming. Maria Santos knows everything. Your operation is finished. Victor laughed, a sound without humor. You think I care? I've got nothing left to lose, but I can still tie up loose ends. His hand moved toward his jacket. James didn't hesitate. He launched himself forward, tackling Victor before the weapon could clear. They crashed into a display of mannequins, plastic bodies scattering. Shoppers screamed. Alarms began to wail. They fought with the desperation of men who understood the stakes. Victor was bigger, stronger, trained in violence. But James fought with something Victor didn't have. Love. Purpose. The absolute refusal to fail the people depending on him. James took a punch to the jaw that made stars explode behind his eyes. He responded with an elbow to Victor's ribs, heard bone crack. They rolled across the polished floor, grappling, neither willing to give ground. Security! Sarah was screaming. Someone help! Victor got his hand around James's throat, squeezing. James's vision began to tunnel. He could hear Sophie crying, Lily shouting his name. No, he would not fail them, not now, not ever. James drove his thumb into Victor's eye. The man roared and released his grip. James sucked in air and drove his fist into Victor's solar plexus. Then again, each blow fueled by 8 months of grief and 3 days of desperate protection. Security officers arrived, weapons drawn. On the ground, both of you, now! He's Victor Kane, James gasped, rolling off the man. Wanted for attempted murder. Check with Detective Maria Santos, NYPD. Victor tried to get up. A security officer planted a knee in his back. Don't move. James crawled to where Sarah held the girls. They collapsed into each other, all 4 of them, shaking with adrenaline and relief. It's over, James whispered into Lily's hair. It's really over. Maria arrived 20 minutes later with local police. She looked at James's split lip and the bruises already forming on his face. You look terrible, she said. You should see the other guy, James replied, and for the first time in days, he smiled. Victor Kane was cuffed and dragged away, shouting threats that no one listened to. Maria watched him go, then turned to James. We've got him. The evidence from his apartment, the victims willing to testify, the witnesses to this assault, the attempted kidnapping. He's done, James. He's never getting out. Sarah started to cry, relief overwhelming her. Lily and Sophie pressed close to James and he held them, feeling the weight of responsibility lift slightly. "What happens now?" Sarah asked. "Now," Maria said, "you start living again, really living, without fear." 3 months later, they sat in a courtroom in Manhattan. The intervening time had been spent in depositions, victim statements, and the slow grinding wheels of justice. They had returned to Folly Beach, where James had hired tutors for the girls and watched Sarah transform from victim to survivor. Now, in this courtroom, it would end. Victor Kane sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, his expensive lawyer beside him. But no amount of legal expertise could overcome the mountain of evidence Maria and the prosecutors had built. The prosecution called witnesses, other victims of Victor's loan sharking operation, the witnesses to the hit and run, financial experts who traced his money laundering operation, police officers who testified about the evidence found in his apartment. Then Sarah took the stand. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair pulled back, her posture straight. She looked Victor in the eye as she recounted the terror, the threats, the desperate attempts to protect her daughters. "He told me," Sarah said, her voice clear and strong, "that little girls were valuable, that if I couldn't pay, he would take Lily and Sophie and sell them. Those were his exact words." Victor's lawyer tried to object, tried to discredit, but Sarah didn't waver. She had lived through hell. She would not be intimidated by a courtroom. When it was James's turn, he described finding the girls, the bruises on Lily, the terror in Sophie's eyes. He told the jury about Victor's pursuit, the chase, the assault at the mall. "This man," James said, looking directly at the jury, "preys on the vulnerable. He destroys families, and he would have destroyed these children if given the chance. He needs to be stopped, permanently." The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, their verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts: attempted murder, assault, money laundering, child endangerment, trafficking conspiracy. The judge sentenced Victor Kane to 25 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. As Victor was led away in chains, he looked at James one last time. James stared back, unflinching. Then he turned to where Sarah and the girls waited. Lily was crying. Sophie clung to her mother. Sarah's face was wet with tears of relief. "It's over," James said, gathering them close. "Really, truly over." 6 months after the trial, they stood together in front of a courthouse of a different kind. Family court, where a judge would make official what had already become true in their hearts. James Richardson was formally adopting Lily and Sophie Parker. The girls wore matching dresses Sarah had picked out. Lily's hair was in careful braids. Sophie clutched a new stuffed rabbit, a gift from James to replace the worn one she had finally agreed to retire. The judge, a kind woman in her 60s, smiled down at them. "This is one of my favorite parts of this job," she said, "taking something broken and making it whole. Mr. Richardson, you understand that adoption is permanent? That these children will be your legal daughters with all the rights and responsibilities that entails?" "I do, Your Honor," James said. "I understood that the night I found them in a parking garage. Everything since has just been paperwork." The judge laughed. "Ms. Parker, you consent to this adoption?" Sarah, standing beside James with her hand in his, nodded. "Completely and without reservation. James has been more of a father to my girls than their biological father ever was. He's earned this." "Lily, Sophie," the judge said, addressing the girls directly, "do you want Mr. Richardson to be your legal father?" "Yes," Sophie shouted, bouncing on her toes. The courtroom erupted in gentle laughter. Lily, more reserved, nodded seriously. "Yes, Your Honor, he keeps his promises, and he loves us. Real love, not the fake kind." The judge's eyes grew misty. "Then by the power vested in me by the state of New York, I hereby grant this adoption. James Richardson, you are now the legal father of Lily Marie Parker Richardson and Sophie Grace Parker Richardson." The gavel came down, and Sophie cheered. Lily threw her arms around James, finally, completely letting go of the last of her walls. James held both girls, and Sarah wrapped her arms around all three of them. A family. Legal now, but real long before any judge said so. Afterwards, they celebrated at a small restaurant near the courthouse. Maria joined them, as did Officer Chen, who had guarded Sarah's hospital room, and a few other friends who had helped along the way. "So what's next?" Maria asked, raising a glass of champagne. "Back to CEO life?" James shook his head. "I'm done with that world. I've been consulting from home, helping medical tech companies with ethical practices. It's enough, more than enough." "And we're looking at houses," Sarah added, glancing at James with a smile that made his heart skip. "Something with enough bedrooms, maybe a yard where the girls can play." "And a dog," Sophie interjected. "Dad promised we could get a dog." Everyone laughed. James felt the warmth of belonging, of purpose, of a life that mattered. Later that night, back at the penthouse that would soon be sold, James tucked the girls into bed one last time in this place where their journey had begun. "Dad," Lily said as he was about to leave, "thank you for everything, for not walking away when you could have." James sat on the edge of her bed. "Lily, you asked me to save Sophie, but you both saved me. I was dead inside before I found you, just going through motions. You gave me a reason to live again." "Do you think about her?" Lily asked. "Your first wife?" "Rachel," James said softly. "Yes, every day, but I don't think she'd be angry about you and Sophie. I think she'd be happy I found a reason to keep going, that I learned from my mistakes with her." "We love you, Dad," Lily whispered. "I love you too, sweetheart. Both of you. More than I knew it was possible to love." In the other bed, Sophie was already asleep, her new rabbit clutched tight. James kissed both girls goodnight and retreated to his room, where Sarah waited. They had been careful, building slowly, making sure the girls were stable before exploring what had been growing between them. But the attraction was undeniable. The respect, deeper. The love, impossible to ignore. "Coffee?" Sarah asked, holding out a cup. "Thanks," James said, taking it and sitting beside her on the sofa that overlooked the city. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the lights of New York sparkle in the darkness. "The girls asked me today," Sarah said quietly, "if we were going to get married." James's heart stuttered. "What did you say?" "I said that was up to us, that we'd know when the time was right." She turned to look at him. "Do you think it could be, right, I mean?" James set down his coffee and took her hand. "Sarah, I loved my first wife. I'll always love her memory. But she's gone, and you're here, and what I feel for you is real and present and terrifying and wonderful all at once." "I feel the same way," Sarah whispered. "But I'm scared. Scared of losing this. Scared that Victor might have friends who come looking. Scared that I'll wake up and this will all have been a dream." "Then let me make you a promise," James said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Sarah's eyes widened. "This isn't a proposal," James clarified quickly. "Not yet. We're not ready. But this is a promise that when we are ready, when the time is right, I'll ask. And I hope you'll say yes." He opened the box. Inside was a simple silver ring with a small diamond. "A promise ring?" Sarah laughed, wiping tears. "We're not teenagers." "No," James agreed. "We're two people who've been through hell and came out the other side. We're two people building something real. And I want you to know that I'm committed to that. To you. To the girls. To this family we've made." Sarah slipped the ring on, and it fit perfectly. She looked at it, then at James, and kissed him softly. "I can't promise forever," she said. "None of us can, but I can promise today, and tomorrow, and every day after that, until forever arrives." "That's enough," James said. "More than enough." They sat together as the city lights began to fade with the coming dawn. Two people who had found each other in the darkest moment and built something bright from the ruins. 5 years later, the house in Connecticut had 4 bedrooms, a large backyard, and a golden retriever named Max, who thought he was a lapdog despite weighing 80 pounds. James Richardson, no longer CEO but successful consultant and full-time father, stood at the stove making pancakes on a Saturday morning. Through the window, he could see Lily, now 12, helping Sophie, now 9, build a fort in the backyard. "Need help?" Sarah asked, wrapping her arms around him from behind. He turned and kissed her, his wedding ring catching the morning light. They had married 2 years ago, a small ceremony on Folly Beach with just family and close friends. "I've got it under control," James said. "Unlike your husband, I can actually cook now." "Your husband appreciates that," Sarah laughed. Lily and Sophie burst through the back door, Max bounding in behind them. Dad, Mom, the fort's done, Sophie announced. Can we have lunch out there? Like a picnic? Sarah asked. Exactly like a picnic, Sophie said, then ran upstairs, Max following. Lily lingered, watching James cook with a soft smile. What? James asked. Nothing, Lily said, just remembering. Remembering what? That night, in the parking garage, when I asked you to take Sophie instead of me. Her voice was thoughtful, not sad. I was so scared, but also so sure that if someone good found her, she'd be okay. James set down the spatula and pulled Lily into a hug. You were the bravest person I'd ever met. You still are. I was terrified, Lily admitted, but I couldn't let him take her. Sophie was so little. She needed someone. And now you're both safe. Forever. Lily pulled back and looked at him seriously. Do you ever regret it? Giving up your company, your old life, everything you built? James thought about the penthouse he'd sold, the board position he'd resigned, the empire he'd walked away from. Then he thought about Saturday morning pancakes and backyard forts and 2 daughters who called him Dad. Not for a single second, he said. That old life was empty. This is full. This matters. Sarah came over and joined the hug. Group hug, Sophie yelled, running back downstairs and crashing into them. Max barked and tried to join, his tail wagging so hard his entire back end wiggled. Later, after the picnic lunch in the fort and an afternoon of playing in the yard, the family settled in the living room. Sophie was curled up with Max, half asleep. Lily was reading. Sarah was working on her laptop, managing the nonprofit she'd started for domestic violence victims. James sat with his own laptop, reviewing a consulting proposal, but he kept getting distracted watching his family. Dad? Sophie said sleepily. Will you tell us the story? Which story, sweetheart? How you found us. The coldest night. James closed his laptop. This had become a ritual, the story of how their family was born. It was November, James began, his voice soft. The coldest night of the year. I was leaving work very late, feeling very alone. He told the story, careful to soften the scary parts for Sophie, but Lily knew the truth. She'd lived it. When he finished, Sophie was asleep. Sarah carried her upstairs while James tucked Lily in. Dad, Lily said as he was about to turn off her light, I'm glad I asked you. To take Sophie, I mean, because you took both of us. You chose both of us. Best decision I ever made, James said, kissing her forehead. Downstairs, he found Sarah waiting with 2 glasses of wine. To family, she said, raising her glass. To family, James echoed. They stood at the window, watching snow begin to fall. Another November. Another cold night. But this time, James Richardson wasn't alone in an empty penthouse. He was home, surrounded by love, living a life that mattered. On the mantel sat a photo taken at the beach 5 years ago. 4 people holding hands. Mommy, Lily, Sophie, Daddy. A promise kept. A family saved. A life redeemed. The coldest night had led to the warmest home. And James Richardson, who had once measured success in profit margins and stock prices, now measured it in pancake breakfasts and bedtime stories and the sound of his daughters laughing in the yard. He had found what he'd been searching for without knowing he was searching. Purpose, love, belonging, home. The end.